or as specific a forecast is, the less the data is available and the more variability there is in the data, so the accuracy is diminished. Finally, forecasts are always wrong to a greater or lesser degree. There are no perfect forecasts, and businesses need to assign some expected degree of error to every forecast. An accurate forecast may have a degree of error that is plus or minus 5%. Aggregate planning. Once demand forecasts have been created, the next step is to create a plan for the company to meet the expected demand. This is called aggregate planning, and its purpose is to satisfy demand in a way that maximizes profit for the company. The planning is done at the aggregate level and not the level of the individual stock keeping units, or SKU. It set the optimum level of production and inventory that will follow over the next 3 to 18 months. The aggregate plan becomes a framework within which short-term decisions are made about production, inventory, and distribution. Production decisions involve setting parameters such as rate of production and the amount of production capacity to use, the size of the workforce, and how much overtime and subcontracting to use. Inventory decisions include how much demand will be met immediately by inventory on hand, and how much demand can be satisfied later and turned into backlog orders. Distribution decisions define how and when products will be moved from the place of production to the place where it will be used or purchased by customers. There are 3 basic approaches taken in creating the aggregate plan. They involve trade-offs among these variables. Those variables are: number 1, amount of production capacity; number 2, level of utilization of the production capacity; number 3, the amount of inventory to carry. We will look briefly at each of these 3 approaches. In actual practice, most companies create aggregate plans that are a combination of these 3 approaches. 1. Use production capacity to match demand. In this approach, the total amount of production capacity is matched to the level of demand. The objective here is to use 100% of capacity at all times. This is achieved by eliminating plant capacity as needed, and hiring and laying off employees as needed. This approach results in low levels of inventory, but it can be very expensive to implement if the cost of adding or reducing plant capacity is high. It is also often disruptive and demoralizing to workforce if people are constantly being hired or fired as demand rises and falls. This approach works best when the cost carrying inventory is high and the cost of changing capacity, plant, and workforce is low. Utilize varying levels of total capacity to match demand. This approach can be used if there are excess production capacity available. If existing plants are not used 24 hours a day and 7 days a week, then there is an opportunity to meet changing demand by increasing or decreasing utilization of product capacity. The size of the workforce can be maintained as a steady rate, and overtime and flexible work scheduling used to match production rates. The result is low levels of inventory and also lower average levels of capacity utilization. The approach makes sense when the cost of carrying inventory is high and the cost of excess capacity is relatively low. Use inventory and backlogs to match demand. Number 3. Using this approach provides for stability in the plant capacity and workforce and enables a constant rate of output. Production is not matched with demand. Instead, inventory is either built up during periods of low demand in anticipation of future demand, or inventory is allowed to run low and backlogs are built up in one period to be filled in a following period. This approach results in higher capacity utilization and lower cost of changing capacity, but it does generate large inventories and backlogs over time as demand fluctuates. It should be used when the cost of capacity and changing capacity is high and the cost of carrying inventory and backlogs is relatively low. Product pricing plan. Companies and entire supply chains can influence demand over time by using price. Depending on how price is used, it will tend to either maximize revenue or gross profit. Typically, marketing and salespeople want to make pricing decisions that will stimulate demand during peak seasons. The aim here is to maximize total revenue. Often, financial or production people want to make pricing decisions that stimulate demand during low periods. Their aim is to maximize gross profit in peak demand periods and generate revenue to cover costs during low demand periods. Relationship of cost structure to pricing. The question for each company to ask is it better to do price promotion during peak periods to increase revenue or during low periods to cover costs? The answer depends on the company's cost structure. If a company has flexibility to vary the size of workforce and productive capacity, and the cost carrying inventory is high, then it is the best to create more demand in peak season. If there is less flexibility to vary workforce and capacity, and if cost to carry inventory is low, it is best to create demand in low periods. An example of company that can quickly ramp up production would be an electronic components manufacturer. Such as companies have invested in plants and equipment that can be quickly reconfigured to produce different final products from an inventory of standard component parts. The finished good inventory is expensive to carry because it soon becomes obsolete and must be written up. These companies are generally motivated to run promotion in peak periods to stimulate demands even further. Since they can quickly increase production levels, a reduction in profit margin can be made up by an increase in total sales if they are able to sell the products that they manufacture. A company that cannot quickly ramp up production level is paper mill. The plant and equipment involved in making paper is expensive and requires a long lead time to build. Once in place, a paper mill operates most efficiently if it's able to run a steady rate all year long. The cost of carrying an inventory of paper production is less expensive than carrying an inventory of electronic components because paper products are commodity items that will not become obsolete. These products also can be stored in less expensive warehouse facilities and are less likely to be stolen. A paper mill is motivated to do price promotion in periods of low demand. A paper mill is motivated to do price promotion in periods of low demand. In periods of high demand, the focus is on maintaining a good profit margin. Since production levels cannot be increased anyway, there is no way to respond to profit from an increase in demand. In periods where demand is below the available production level, then there is a value in increased demand. The fixed cost of plant and equipment is constant, so it is best to try to balance demand with available production capacity. This way, the plant can be run steadily at full capacity. Inventory management plan. Inventory management is a set of techniques that are used to manage the inventory levels within different companies in the supply chain. The aim is to reduce the cost of inventory as much as possible while still maintaining the service level that the customer requires. Inventory management takes its major inputs from the demand forecast for products and the prices of the products. With these two inputs, inventory management is an ongoing process of balancing product inventory levels to meet demand and exploiting economies of scale to get the best product prices. As we discussed Chapter 1, there are three kinds of inventory. Number 1, cycle inventory. Number 2, seasonal inventory. Number 3, safety inventory. Cycle inventory and seasonal inventory are both influenced by economy of scales considerations. The cost structure of companies in any supply chain will suggest certain levels of inventory based on production cost and inventory carrying cost. Safety inventory is influenced by the predictability of product demand. The less predictable product demand is, the higher the level of safety inventory is required to cover unexpected swings in demand. The inventory management operations in a company or an entire supply chain is composed of a blend of activities related to managing the three different types of inventory. Each type of inventory has its own specific challenges, and the mix of these challenges will vary from one company to another and from one supply chain to another. Cycle inventory. Cycle inventory is the inventory required to meet product demand over the time period between placing orders for the product. Cycle inventory exists because economies of scale make it desirable to make fewer orders of large quantities of a product rather than continuous orders of a small product quantity. The end-use customers of a product may actually see and use product in continuous small amounts throughout the year, but the distributor and the manufacturer of the product may find it more cost-efficient to produce a stock of products in large batches that do not match the usage pattern. Cycle inventory is the buildup of inventory in a supply chain due to the fact that production and stocking of inventory is done in a lot of sizes that are larger than the ongoing demand for the product. For example, a distributor may experience an ongoing demand for item A that is 100 units per week. The distributor finds, however, that it is the most cost-effective to order in batches of 650 units. Every 6 weeks or so, the distributor places an